Let's talk about some financial tips, perhaps for that person who's in that situation. What are some things that you recommend they consider when you're transitioning from, full time, part time, and now launching their company?
Yeah. So I am not a financial guru in any way, shape, or form. I think there are a few things that I would offer up that can be helpful. Is one, you don't have to automatically shift it.
Hello, Empower Nation. Welcome to Empower Her Money podcast. I'm your host, Angela Duncan. In today's episode, I get to interview Lindsay Barnett. She's an executive coach with barnettcoaching.com. We're going to talk about the concept of being fully part time, how to have that conversation with your employer, some key steps when heading down the part time route, the incredible book that she has coming out, and so much more. Check out this episode. Hi, Lindsay. Welcome to Empower Her Money podcast.
Hi, Angela. So excited to be here.
I'm excited for you to be here as well. We've got a lot of tips that you'll be teaching to the audience today, but I would love for you to first start off with your story, kind of how you got to being the coach that you are today.
Okay. Well, it has definitely been a long journey here. So, I'm an executive coach and an HR consultant, and I've been working for the last couple decades with Fortune 500 companies and growing startups. And I think for me, having been at different companies and worked with all different kinds of clients and employees, I think one of the things that I've really felt deeply in the last several years is just the amount of suffering that's in the workplace right now. And so for me, this last year or so has really been a big pivot point to be able to take my learnings, both my personal learnings, my experiential learnings from my clients, and really be able to play that back for people to help people realize that they have a choice, find their voice in creating the employee experience or the work experience for themselves. And so that's really what I'm hoping to be able to do. And a lot of that, just to get, if it makes sense, to get into a little bit more of my personal background and how I found my way here. I think just one thing to call out is that you know, I generally care about well-being. I try to have, good wellness in my life, but I did find that I was starting to move down kind of workaholic ways. And so, to the point where, my husband was like, "Where are you?" You like disappear into the office and we don't see you for hours and you like emerge in a haze. And, I think that I kind of sometimes we need to hear from our loved ones what's really going on. And so that was my call to action to negotiate to go part-time. And
Mm.
so, which also then set me on the path to where I am now to, more entrepreneurial pursuits. So I feel like I've learned a lot myself, want to be able to share some of those learnings with others.
Yeah, well, I think one of the key points you just touched on, when someone might be thinking about starting their own business, you were able to negotiate with your current employer a part time role, which at least gave you the security of having the income while you started to work on your business. Talk about how that conversation, how
Yeah.
did you approach that? How did you prepare that so that someone who might be thinking of the same could do that with their employer as well?
Yeah. So not every employer is going to be set up to support that. I was very lucky in that it happened to be, around 2021 when a lot of employers were coming back with more flexible work arrangements, of which one of those was part time. And so I think the key element to my being able to negotiate this was that I really took on a win-win mindset, right? How can I really be mindful of what the business needs? How do I be mindful of what I need? And where do those two meet? Right. It wasn't all about me. I need this time and whatnot. I went to my manager at the time, who was a wonderful supporter in general, and said, here's what I see is happening in the business. Here's what's going on in my life. Uh, Here are 18 different options of how I think I can still support the business and also do it part-time. And by the way, by me going part-time, it means less salary that's being paid to me here. I mean, even getting down into the specifics of how many different ways the organization could be winning. And so the other dynamic I think to know about the part-time is it's not all, rainbows and unicorns. um, it worked for me. I needed it, but there are, other considerations for people when they're thinking about part-time. There are biases that people have, right? There's you know, what's I'm blinking out on the name of the bias off the top of my head, but proximity bias, right? Where it's like, oh, I don't know if you're around, and so therefore I'm not going to give you the more meaty work. So there's definitely pros and cons, and I would encourage people to be aware of what this may mean. It may mean that you might be put on the layoff list faster, right? Because people haven't figured out, wow, I'm getting this amazing resource at a fraction of the cost. That's not always the mindset. But I really think part-time is going to be the next iteration in the workplace. So
Mm,
that's
yeah.
that's my sense of things. And I think also for people building on the part-time element as well, what I call it is fully part-time. So it's not just I'm part-time in my hours, I am working fully part-time. And by working fully part-time, that means that I am able to recognize that work is just part of my life, not all of my life, going back to that workaholic tendency. And by doing so, I can be fully present in whatever aspect of my life is needed. So I really am trying to see this as an alternative to quiet quitting or working ourselves sick, right? There's so many kind of not healthy ways that people are working today that we could, remedy by just looking at work in new ways.
Yeah. Yeah, love that. All right, so we've negotiated, we've come up with a win-win, set up some boundaries and communication. We're ready to kind of launch our own business. Let's talk about some financial tips, perhaps for that person who's in that situation. What are some things that you recommend they consider when you're transitioning from, full-time, part-time, and now launching their company?
Yeah. So I am not a financial guru any way, shape, or form. I think there are a few things that I would offer up that can be helpful. Is one, you don't have to automatically shift into part-time. You can play with it a little bit. So I know I had a former colleague who, for a variety of reasons, had a lot of excess vacation time, and he was in a company that he's kind of, you use it or you lose it. And so he had this, I don't know if it was a 2-month window, where he just took off Mondays and Fridays, and he just played with using his vacation time, the part-time schedule, to just see, how did it feel, how was his work product. And it enabled him to also, he never shifted to part-time, but enabled him to just play a little bit with what works for me, what works for the company, right? Are they getting as much out of me in this part-time? And he said, I felt more productive, more creative, more innovative than I've ever felt in my career. So, you can play with part-time before you actually take the financial hit. The other thing that I would advise is there's a lot of different ways to work part-time. So, there may be 3 days a week, there may be 4 days a week. There may be some people just have 4.5 days. So there's a lot of different ways you can play with it to meet your financial needs. And then the other thing to be mindful of is what's the hit to your overall compensation. So, from the standpoint of what your company might be offering, do you get full 401k? Because definitely take advantage of the full 401k.
Yes.
Do you get full benefits, or do your contributions have to change? And some companies may not be set up for part-time based on that, right? So there's a lot of different dynamics to play out, but I definitely encourage people to play around with it a little bit first before you really dive in, so you can see, can I sustain
Yeah.
this? I know my husband was like, is that your full paycheck now? And I was like, yes, it is, my friend. Yes, it is.
Yeah, and that's some great
So,
information and conversation. Having that conversation with the employer, some good questions there is, can you still participate in the 401k or retirement? Because if you can fully participate and they have a match, definitely want to keep doing that. And the health insurance or dental insurance or any other insurance options, can I still participate in that? And if not, then you definitely need to think about that as part of your budget for your family. So those are good things too. And another piece of advice, obviously, is to make sure you still have your savings account, because you mentioned you could be on the firing block if that comes to it in the company. And you want to make sure you have some money set aside for that what if scenario. But one of the key points that you touched on too is the creativity piece. I've learned this about myself. When I get burnt out, my creative brain shuts off. So until you get to experience some of kind of that downtime, you might not know that about yourself and how much more creative you can be for your job or for your new business when you do, cut back a little bit on those hours as well.
yeah. And, the other piece of it too is there's time and there's energy. So, sometimes, there's a lot of different ways to stave off burnout. It doesn't just have to be about cutting back your hours. You know, there's studies that show that if employees who experience a sense of belonging are 2.5 times less likely to burn out. So instead of sitting at your desk and, shoveling noodles in your mouth over lunch, go get lunch with somebody. You will come back and you will feel re-engaged, recharged, and you'll probably get the work that you were sitting there doing haphazardly at your desk done faster and more efficiently and with more creativity. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. That's why I'm trying to embrace the fully part-time. It doesn't have to just be about the hours. It's really the mindset and how you're approaching your work.
Now, if you have been able to negotiate more of a part-time role, how do you stay culturally involved in the company when you're not there the full-time hours as maybe somebody else in the company might be?
Yeah. And this is one that I tend to recommend. Really, you probably don't want to pursue part-time until you feel really anchored with the company. I went down that path after I had been with the company for 3 years, and I had a lot of relationships built, and I knew what the business did. I was really pretty integrated into the company. That being said, there were times where I was like, I can't go to that happy hour, or do I make the decision from a boundary perspective? I'm going to go to that happy hour, or I'm going to shift my days so that I can potentially be present for the all hands meeting, or be present for the, quarterly breakfast, whatever that is. There's, having some flexibility and really being mindful of, how do I keep the relationships going? If I am going to be in the office, set up lunches. Don't just sit in an office on Zoom calls, right? Like, how do I keep connected with people and stay connected with the connectors? There's always the people that are uber connected. So, you can have a kind of higher ROI on time spent when you're with the people that, know everything that's going on.
Yeah, that's usually the person that's doing, like, the baby showers and the birthday parties, so
Right.
that's a great person to stay connected to. Awesome,
Yes.
Lindsay. So I know
Yeah.
you have a new book coming out. Why don't you talk about that and tell us
Yeah.
more?
Yeah, I would love to. So, my book is called Working Hell to Working Well, Making Your Company Work for You. And, really what I've tried to capture in it is a lot of my learnings around how can we approach work in a way that produces less suffering, right? And some of the suffering we bring upon ourselves, and some of the suffering is brought upon by others. But I think, one of the central tenets to the book is that we've got to figure this out, and we have to figure this out together because the way that we're working is just not working.
Mm.
And, I'm deeply concerned actually for the newer generations that are starting to join the workforce with their levels of anxiety and depression and whatnot. If we want to be able to really get the best out of everybody, which we absolutely can and need to do to survive and get through, all that we can in this, current state of the world, climate, et cetera, we really need to create a place that has a strong workplace quality that gets the best out of everybody. And I think for me, a lot of what I try to share in the book is that, so much of wellness or well-being is a little bit of a finger pointing game, right? Like companies are saying, well, we set, individuals go do yoga, go do meditation, right? And then the individuals are pointing to the company and say, why are you giving me so much work and laying people off, right? But at the end of the day, we have to work on it together. The company plays a role, the individuals play a role. If I'm trying to work 9 to 5 and you're working 5 to 9, it's very hard for us to come to a place where we can really create a culture that supports well-being. So a lot of what I'm trying to do is take my knowledge of how organizations work, how humans work, what I've learned from my coaching clients, things I've tried myself, and just mash that together in a very action oriented way. It's not heavy on the research, it pulls from the research, but it's really about be the change. What's that small step that you can take that will benefit you? And by the way, by role modeling that, you are also helping others.
Love that. Awesome, Lindsay. So if our audience wants to learn more about you, your coaching program, or your upcoming book, what is the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, so they can find me at my website, which is www.barnettcoaching, two T's, barnettcoaching.com. Love to connect with people on LinkedIn. I do a lot of posts and articles where I share tips and whatnot on LinkedIn. I also have, kind of freebies on my website. So the latest thing right now, I'm doing a big push around networking because I am so concerned about so many people who have been laid off recently.
Mm.
So doing a big push around networking. So there's a neat little networking guide on my website right now under the resources, if that can support people. So yeah, that's some of the best ways to find me right now.
Awesome. Well, I know my audience loves freebies, so they'll have to check out your website, barnettcoaching.com. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for your time today.
Thank you, Angela. So great speaking with you.
Are you a business owner looking to increase your profit? Imagine transforming every podcast guest appearance to profit. It's your turn to shine as a podcast guest. I have created a course just for you. It's the secret to profiting from podcasting and being a guest. Go to podcastmoneymagnet.com today and check out this incredible course that's going to teach you how to grow your brand and grow your bank account. Feel the shift as you master being a podcast guest. Podcastmoneymagnet.com today.